is a special report from Beck News.
Good evening and welcome to Beck TV and the Dakota 2022 senatorial debate featuring candidates Democrat Dr. Katrina Christensen and Independent Dr. Rick Becker. Senator Hoeven has declined invitation to participate in tonight's debate. Thank you to Zimmerman's Furniture in Bismarck for supplying our debate furnishings. My name is Steve Bakken and moderating with me this evening is Tyler Axness.
Steve and I, well, first, good evening, and thanks for joining us here on Beck TV, and for those that are here in Washburn. Steve and I have some commonalities. Him and I are both in talk radio. You can catch Steve weekdays from 9 to 11 on 1270. That's in Bismarck. You can catch me on 790 AM. That's out of Fargo from 2 to 5 weekdays. Both talk show hosts, both involved in politics. I'm a former state senator, former mayor of Bismarck, as you well are aware of Mr. Bakken here. This evening, we are broadcasting live from Memorial Hall in Washburn. This evening, we will be alternating who is asking the questions. We've decided that by a coin flip, and we will be going back and forth between these candidates, staggering who answers first, again, based on a coin flip. So that is where we're going to be starting off, Steve.
And it is recommended that the live audience please hold its applause until the completion of a candidate's answer. So that the candidate doesn't forfeit their time for the applause. Candidates will be given 2 minutes for answers and 2 minutes for follow-up answers, rebuttals, or a return to a previous topic. Candidates, please be mindful of the clock.
It's television, folks, so we will be taking some time and some breaks throughout the evening. We will have 3 separate breaks. We're going to begin this evening with opening statements of 3 minutes from each of the candidates, and we will begin that with Dr. Becker.
All right, thank you everyone for coming out, and to the viewers, thank you for tuning in. I'm a North Dakota boy. I was born and raised in Mandan. Went to college at University of North Dakota, School of Medicine as well. And at the completion of my training in Detroit and Manhattan and Little Rock, Arkansas, I could not wait to get back to North Dakota and raise a family. So 25 years ago, I came back to Bismarck, opened a plastic surgery practice. My wife Annie and I have 4 kids, 1 grandson and another one on the way. We own a small business together, and I'd also like to give a little shout out to my parents, Gary and Judy, and my sister Wendy in the audience. Thank you for being here. I'm also a state representative. I became a state representative 10 years ago. I'll be retiring at the end of next month. I was not, as an adult even, very interested or involved in politics. But as things were coming along at the end of George Bush's term, at the beginning of Obama's term, I became a little more aware and a little more concerned, frankly, a lot more concerned. And concomitantly, in North Dakota, I was becoming concerned because I saw that despite having a Republican majority, our spending was skyrocketing. I decided, I got to get in there and try and help things out. At the same time then, when I was elected, it occurred to me, you're taking time off of work, time from your career, you better make it worthwhile. And that's the attitude I went in with, is to make a difference, to stand for principle, to not worry about playing in some political country club, and not worry about making friends even, which is obvious if you've been in the state legislature. But I was concerned about just getting the job done. And I have a great many bills, substantial landmark bills that I authored and passed, including constitutional carry, Second Amendment Preservation Act, Civil Asset Forfeiture Reform, Confidential Informant Reform. The list goes on. Most recently, the prohibition of COVID-19 vaccine passports in the state. So it's that kind of approach that I want to bring to DC, because I see DC is in the same position. We need a change. We need to make a difference. And what we need, I think, is what I have to offer, which is to go in with principle, to speak boldly, speak truthfully, have integrity, and do everything you can for the people of North Dakota and the people of the United States. I hope that tonight you'll hear from me exactly that voice I'm referring to, one of principle, one of boldness, and one of truth. Thank you.
Dr. Christensen.
Thank you. I just want to thank Beck TV and the Dakotan for sponsoring this debate. I want to thank Dr. Becker for committing to doing the debate, and of course, Tyler and Steve for moderating. I would like to thank Senator Hoeven, but as you can tell, he failed to make it tonight. He's failed the North Dakota constituents time and time again. I've spent the last 7 months campaigning across the state and learning about how he has failed our communities time and time again. Many of you are probably wondering why I'm in this race. Well, I'm a trained agricultural engineer. I've spent my adult life solving problems. And let me tell you, this nation has a lot of problems, and our elected officials have failed to address them. The state of North Dakota has 24 counties that do not have mental health professionals. There is a teacher shortage of 438 teachers in the state. Our healthcare system is inaccessible to many communities and unaffordable to many North Dakotans. So when I say that I want to fix problems, I mean it. I have 3 patents after working for Cargill at the world's largest malting facility at the time in Spiritwood. I've worked for an ag startup in Fargo, North Dakota, designing manufacturing or processing equipment for value-added processing in the malting world, and I've worked as a plant engineer at an ethanol plant. I'm currently an educator at the University of Jamestown. I am committed to fully funding education in the state of North Dakota. I am committed to fixing inflation for normal North Dakotans, not people who are just using it as an excuse to enrich themselves. I am committed to bringing manufacturing back to the United States of America and to the state of North Dakota. I am committed to making sure that we have value-added processing that gives our producers and our farmers the margins they deserve. I am committed to serving North Dakota. I am in this race to protect this country and to solve problems. I am not in this race because I want to get rich. I am a person that's motivated by being right and doing the right thing. And as a trained engineer, I know how to approach problems and finish them and continuously improve. So I hope over the course of the next 2 hours, we'll be able to have a discussion that will lead to actual dialogue about the problems that we face and that we can fix. We are the greatest nation on the earth, and we can do this.
Tyler and I have broken up the questions into addressing the absence of Senator Hoeven: agriculture, energy, infrastructure, carbon, supply chain and workforce, deficit and fiscal concerns, crime, immigration, education, ESG, veterans affairs, election affairs, and abortion this evening. Flip the coin. I will be going first. Dr. Becker, you were also the winner of the coin flip. You will be going first. Our first question is, why are you running for the U.S. Senate, and what do you feel qualifies you to represent North Dakota?
Well, I started off in my opening statement on why I want to run. We recognize that America is at the brink. We're at a point that we are approaching a point of no return. And it's taken a long time to get there, but I actually believe we are there. I see tremendous problems with the current Biden administration and where they are leading us. Simultaneously, I'm seeing a problem of a lack of good leadership on the Republican side, or at least with a great deal of the Republicans in the Senate, in the House. So I think by going there, bringing that same approach I brought to North Dakota of being a fighter, speaking boldly, making things happen. You know, I see Senator Mike Lee and Senator Rand Paul. There's no reason that North Dakota can't have someone that they can point to and be proud of like those senators. Additionally, what qualifies me, frankly, I will say that the way our founders set it up Anybody who is a citizen and has a love of country and a desire to improve it is qualified. Now, what qualifies me beyond that, I would say, are 10 years of being a state representative that has taken on all of the big issues, the hard issues, the politically unsafe issues, without hesitation. Thinking more about accomplishing this goal of achieving more liberty, of minimizing government intrusion into our lives, and not giving a care at all for whether it affects my chances of re-election. That approach is what we need. People in North Dakota and across America are looking for authenticity. They're looking for a genuine person who will represent them and who will do the right thing at all times.
Thank you, Dr. Becker. Dr. Christensen, same question to you. Why are you running for the U.S. Senate, and what do you feel qualifies you to represent North Dakota?
Thank you. I am running for the United States Senate to protect this country. When I first jumped into this race, I was motivated to run because I wanted to see government operations improved. I don't think we should go from continuing resolution to continuing resolution. I think it's inefficient to have government shutdowns. The basic operation of our representatives is to run the government, and they have failed. And I am not somebody that accepts failure. I'm an engineer. I have a PhD in agricultural engineering from Iowa State University. I understand the agricultural sector in the state of North Dakota way more than a banker does. I understand the energy sector in North Dakota because I actually worked in the energy industry as an ethanol plant engineer. And I'm a parent. I have 3 children in Jamestown that go to public school. And I want to see my children have a bright future in North Dakota, and that means that we have to address the learning loss that we are seeing in our classrooms due to social, emotional, and behavioral issues that are not being addressed by our legislature, and they're certainly not being addressed by our federal representation. I am approaching this race not as a suicide mission as the Democrat in the race, but as a holy mission. And I don't mean that in the religious sense. I mean that I have a drive to defeat fear and greed of power and to protect this country from people who are using it to enrich themselves. Time and time again, we see how our congressional representatives do increase their wealth and do nothing for their constituents in the states they're supposed to be serving.
Very good. I'm going to ask a follow-up question before we get on to the next one and address and rip the Band-Aid off that there is an empty chair between the two of you here, but I picked up on a theme from both of you about going out there, being a fighter, wanting to get things done. And I'm curious, for both of you, how you plan to do that? And Dr. Becker, I'm going to start with you. You're running as an independent in this race. How do you caucus with Republicans, independents? Walk me through that, and then how you negotiate, given the fact that you will be an independent if you win this election.
Right, so well, I will caucus depending on what the situation is with anyone who is there to do the right thing on that topic. Generally speaking, I'll be caucusing with the Republicans. I'll be caucusing with a Freedom Caucus or a Liberty Caucus or what have you. I mean, again, I'm there to just get the job done. And as far as being an independent and not being able to have the same degree of negotiation, if anything, it allows me greater negotiation. I don't need to be beholden to Mitch McConnell. I can do whatever I think is right, which frankly, it doesn't matter whether there's a D, an I, or an R behind my name. It doesn't change one iota. But if anything, we could argue that it gives me more freedom.
Dr. Christensen, a follow-up along those lines as well. You talked about protecting people from those that are out there in office, as you were alluding to, making profit. Question is how? How do you go out there? How do you negotiate? How do you get the job done that you're trying to get here?
Well, Tyler, that's a great question. And I think that when I look back in our history and I see who was the most effective at getting things done, I look back at Lyndon B. Johnson. He probably had one of the greatest senatorial records of anybody. right? And when he was president, he was able to accomplish the mission of the Apollo missions, right? Landing humans on the moon, right? He had to bring people together, secure resources, and manage that so that within the decade, right, we landed humans on the moon. So I would model myself after Lyndon B. Johnson. One other thing that I think distinguishes me from other Democrats is that I consider myself a North Dakota Democrat, not a national Democrat. I don't buy into the idea that we can only win in urban areas. I've been all over the state, to rural areas. I've been out to Crosby, I've been to Gwinner, I've been to Grafton. Wherever I could go, I went, because it was important to understand the problems there. I'm actually from a town of 1,200 people, so I understand what it's like to be from a rural community that's ignored and doesn't necessarily receive the attention that the urban areas do. So when I go to Washington, D.C., when I sign my name up to be a part of something, it's going to be based on the evidence and the outcomes. It's not going to be because I'm a Democrat. I'm an engineer. I could not accept legislation that was not going to achieve objectives that were going to benefit the state of North Dakota.
There's 3 candidates in this race. There's 3 chairs. There's only 2 of you that showed up tonight. And I'm not trying to hand off my duties as being a moderator, but I get to ask questions daily from 2 to 5 on radio. Senator John Hoeven declined to show up. I don't know if a reason was provided, but I'm curious, and I think the order is starting with you, Dr. Christensen. What question would you ask Senator Hoeven if he was here tonight?
What do you do all day? Seriously, what do you do? I mean, he's sponsored. He's sponsored 7 bills that have passed in the 12 years that he's been there. If you watch any of his speeches, he has the most recycled material I have ever seen. He's not coming up with new ideas. He's not trying to figure out how to get a bank back in Bowman or how to make sure that our nursing homes in Western North Dakota can take diabetic patients. What do you do all day?
Dr. Becker, same question. What question would you ask of Senator Hoeven had he shown up tonight and you were in this position?
Well, I'm not even going to try and top that. But I will say that John Hoeven not being here is a perfect example of what he's about as a politician. John Hoeven is a play it safe, politically safe politician. He's under the radar. You don't hear from him except for every 6 years when it's time for re-election. And that's the exact opposite of what we need right now, the exact opposite. I've heard him referred to as a backbencher. Lord help me if anyone ever calls me a backbencher. We need people who are going to work and fight, and he hasn't been there. He's playing it safe. Conventional wisdom says when you're the incumbent and you have the greatest name recognition and you believe you're in the lead, don't do debates. Now, that might be good for keeping your job as a career politician like John Hoeven is, but it isn't good for the people of North Dakota. So this is classic John Hoeven.
Dr. Becker, this next question is for you to begin with. Agriculture is a foundational component in the success of North Dakota's economy. How will you protect family farming operations in North Dakota and across the country? And how would you work to mitigate input costs to farmers?
Right, well, one of the biggest things that's I'll say right off the top is maybe we shouldn't let China buy farmland. That would help the farm families quite a bit. As far as mitigating the input costs, so you're talking fertilizer as one of the big things. You're talking about a lot of things. There is situation after situation in which government is the problem, and you'll likely hear that as a theme throughout all of the questions and answers. We can look at a number of ways in which we can have those, by taking government out of the picture, lower the input costs. Whether it's sanctions on Russia, whether it's sanctions on countries where we derive potash, it's one thing after another. So that combined, I would say, with our overspending causing inflation. Inflation is affecting everything. Farming, agriculture is no different. Labor market, one of the biggest input costs, we think fertilizer right off the bat, one of the biggest input costs for agriculture is labor, the same as it is for most industries. We can't find labor anywhere. I'll go back and say maybe we shouldn't pay people to sit on the couch. Maybe government has been too involved, and we need to step back, and we need to let the market work. And believe it or not, it will work for farmers. It will work for every industry.
Dr. Christensen, same question for you. Agriculture, of course, is a foundational component of the success of North Dakota's economy. How will you protect family farming operations in North Dakota and across the country? And how would you work to mitigate input costs to farmers?
So I agree we should not let foreign adversaries buy some of the most productive farmland in the United States of America. We also shouldn't let people buy farmland under the guise of a trust in our state, right? We have an anti-corporate farming bill that needs to be enforced. When addressing the input costs for farming, I think that as an agricultural engineer, we need to reduce the energy use in our operations, right? So what are the things that we can do to make those operations more efficient, right? How do we inflation-proof our family farms? And that means that we need to be able to diversify our energy sector so that we are not dependent upon OPEC pricing, right? Because energy impacts food prices, it impacts fuel prices, it impacts fertilizer prices. And so we have to make sure that we have a diversity and competition in our energy sector. Furthermore, we need to break up the fertilizer and the pesticide companies. They own like 80% of the market, or maybe it's more like 90% of the market. Farmers have no competition in the marketplace. And if there isn't competition, then they can't be competitive. And the last leg is making sure that they have markets that they can sell into where they're not being exploited, right? In the state of North Dakota, we are the state with the third most crop acres planted behind Iowa. But Iowa has 6 times the processing capacity that the state of North Dakota has. And that processing is where all of the money is made. Every dollar that you spend in the grocery store, 15 cents of it goes to all of the farmers. So just think about that. It's all made in the value-added processing. And when John Hoeven was governor, he didn't bring value-added ag. When John Hoeven was senator, he did not bring value-added ag to the state of North Dakota. And I think what we can say is that John Hoeven is not helping our family farms survive and make money and live great lives.
Thank you, Dr. Christensen.
I've got a follow-up based on what Dr. Christensen you just provided. You talked about fertilizer. 85% of our cattle industry, you've got the meat packers owning 4 of them have 85%. How do you address that if you become senator?
Well, I think that the USDA is a government organization that we really need to look to modernize helping our producers have their own value-added processing. So if we create co-ops in the state of North Dakota that can enter into marketplaces that are competitive with those big 4 suppliers is really important. So how do you process the cattle efficiently, and how do you access those markets? And really, our producers need help with that. Our ranchers need assistance with that, and that's okay, and we can do this. We just have avoided doing it.
Dr. Becker, the same question. You had alluded to markets, that there's less need for government involvement in some of these industries. With that being the case, 85% of this owned by 4 packers, how do you address it as senator?
Well, again, we need to pull government out. It doesn't matter if it's the 4 meat packers. It doesn't matter if it's the 4 baby formula manufacturers that make 98% of the formula. It doesn't matter if it's the insulin manufacturers. The reason that the prices are high is because there isn't adequate competition. We're not allowing the market to work. The reason there isn't adequate competition is because of the barriers to entry to new startup, smaller firms that would like to be competitive, but government doesn't allow them because those restrictions and regulations are so costly that the big box types of businesses can afford to absorb those costs. They love regulation. Believe it or not, big business loves regulation. Small business can't afford it, and so it keeps them out of the market. It's the same answer for all of it. Pull government out. You take away, why are there only 4 meat packers? Obviously, you and I could go and start a meat packing plant and make a ton of money because there's only 4 meat packers and nobody likes them. Why can't we? Government regulations and restrictions.
We're going to keep on the topic of agriculture here, and we will be taking a break here in just a little bit. But Congress, they're debating the next farm bill. They're holding listening sessions right now. I'm curious, the foundation of the farm bill and some of those listening sessions has been crop insurance from farmers. I'm curious, and we'll start with you, Dr. Becker. I know that you've made some news, and some people have forced you into the news on your position on the farm bill. Your position on it. Clarify it for us.
Sure. So I was pushed in the news by the candidate who's not present because they made inaccurate statements saying that I wanted to get rid of crop insurance. You know, what I said is philosophically, I don't know where federal crop insurance is at in the Constitution. But be that as it may, we have crop insurance. To say I'm against crop insurance is like saying I don't want you to have home insurance or car insurance. It makes no sense at all. It's important to have a safety net, just like it is for homes and cars. So, but what I do stand by is that the federal crop insurance program can be improved. There is not a single federal program that can't be improved by increasing efficiency, getting rid of waste, getting rid of abuse. The federal crop insurance program is no different. What we can do, for instance, is perhaps means testing. We can look at having only those people that are actively engaged in farming. It's not for crop insurance, but it is for other agricultural activities. Why don't we incorporate that? We can look at a host of things, for instance, helping farmers move to a situation in which they have multi-option parcels instead of the single, where that will take out a lot of the potential misuse or abuse. There are other areas as well. It would be really nice if farmers could choose what crops they're going to plant based on what they foresee as market forces, what their own interpretation is to make the best possible revenue stream for the security of their family, instead of just checking to see, well, what's the government going to pay for this or that. So I'd like to reform federal crop insurance program to improve on it in those manners, but also in a way that gives farmers more individual choice and more control of what they do on a daily basis. These are things that I don't see how anyone could argue with. And that's the way it is for all federal programs, no different than crop insurance.
Dr. Christensen, the Farm Bill is being discussed. Your position when it comes to crop insurance and what you want in this Farm Bill.
So I think that the crop insurance as it is, I definitely think there's an opportunity that it might be taken advantage of by some producers. But in general, I think what the crop insurance is really doing is it is making up for the fact that farmers are exploited in the marketplace, right? The large value-added processors are able to set the selling point, and so they're at a disadvantage already with that. And so if we can create more market competition for a variety of crops in North Dakota, I think our producers would be much happier with that. I do think that crop insurance continues to be important during drought years, during flood years, and grasshoppers, what have you. So I think it's important that we continue to offer that, but I also think we need to correct the market for the inefficiencies in the competition for farmers to participate in the market. They don't have an option when they're selling stuff, right? They have very few buyers that they have to choose between. Often it's on contract, and those contracts need to be transparent so that the market players are not taking advantage of farmers. And that's really what we need to focus on, is the disadvantages in the marketplace.
Thank you, Dr. Christensen. I'm Steve Bakken, along with Tyler Axness. We're going to be taking a commercial break right now. Scheduled television break. We'll return in a few moments with more of this televised statewide North Dakota senatorial debate brought to you by the Dakotan and Beck News between Dr. Katrina Christensen and Dr. Rick Becker. More after this.
You don't need to live in Silicon Valley to get the best internet speeds in America. You can find them right here in WRT territory.
If we all just put a little bit of effort in and work together, we can get a lot done. We can grow as a community.
WRT members can build successful businesses and receive quality education, all from the rural communities they love.
The sky's the limit for us. We can really do anything that anybody else can do, especially now that we're connected to the world.
Work and play from anywhere. Learn more at westriv.com.
We're the ladies of Another View.
Program every day that I write and I edit, I put together because I want people to have news from a true perspective.
Bringing you our take on local issues.
This isn't your dad's or your grandpa's Democratic Party that are in charge right now.
With views you won't see anywhere else.
Who is our greatest adversary in the world? And without question, it is China.
Catch us weekdays at 4:30 Central on Beck News and online at beck.news.
Lori Hins here with No Apologies on Beck.
So irrefutable, the mainstream media has to come out and admit it now. And it leads directly to the president's office,
where we bring you our after-hours oasis of sanity.
I just learned that the 7 dirty words weren't real. He just made them up. Like, these are the 7 dirty words you can't say.
Every Saturday and Sunday.
The importation people can't actually check it. I mean, it's nuts.
On Beck and Beck.news.
Hey y'all, it's Trent on the loose. I'm a 6th generation farmer, husband, patriot, father. And as much as I'd love to just sit here under this shade tree and celebrate my own place on my front porch, truth of the matter is that people don't know who, where, and how is producing their food. So travel the country with Trent on the loose, and we'll find those interesting human interest stories behind the people that bring us the efficient food supply. Trent on the loose.
Beck News is your leader in local. Beck specials and live information for you. Original programming. Exclusive local sports. Beck is local for you. Uncensored topics and uncensored opinions. Unapologetic politics, where all sides are represented. Full episodes online anytime at beck.news. All in one network. Your leader in local, Beck News.
Well, welcome back to the U.S. Senate debate here on Beck TV. I'm Tyler Axis, along with Steve Bakken, moderating tonight's debate with Dr. Rick Becker, Dr. Katrina Christensen. You're watching us on Beck TV, whether that's streaming, on TV itself, worldwide, all of that, and we appreciate you joining us. We left off with our conversation with agriculture, and Steve, I'll let you take it from here.
Agriculture, and I believe this one's for Dr. Christensen. Agriculture is the Farm Bill, of course, is always a concern to North Dakotans and North Dakota producers, but the vast majority pertains to SNAP rather than agriculture programs. What is your stance on both of these programs being joined in the Farm Bill, and would you consider separating them so there is more transparency for the taxpayers?
I think we can separate them. I do support SNAP benefits. I'm from a rural community, as I already mentioned. And, my dad lost his farm during the 80s farm crisis, and my family was in an unfortunate position, and my family received WIC benefits, including SNAP at times. And so I was able to eat because of government programs. I don't think that there is anything wrong with that, and the transparency that the taxpayers probably need to be more concerned with are any sort of kickbacks to corporations or corporate farms, not people who need to eat.
Dr. Becker, same question for you. The Farm Bill is always a concern to North Dakota producers, but the vast majority pertains to SNAP rather than agriculture programs, yet it's still called the Farm Bill. What is your stance on both of these programs being joined in the Farm Bill, and would you consider separating them so there's more transparency for taxpayers?
Right, absolutely. I think separating them would be great. The way I view it is that they have intentionally put the farm component of the Farm Bill along with things like SNAP or food stamps intentionally so that rural states will vote for it no matter how much is being done with SNAP, and the big city senators will vote for it no matter what's being done in the farm. They just let it slide through. North Dakotans, I believe, think that it's appropriate when it comes to food stamps that after a certain period of time, it gets to a point where maybe there should be a work requirement to continue receiving food stamps. John Hoeven voted against an amendment just like that, as near as I can tell, 3 times in his career in the Senate. That does not represent what North Dakota wants. And again, I have no idea what kind of back deals were made to vote like that, but separating those out, I think, just as you've said, improves transparency. And I think it helps with accountability too. So there's no excuse to vote for that kind of stuff, regardless, but especially if you tend to be a squishy politician and you're willing to vote for stuff you disagree with to try and get that little nugget that you do agree with, that'll take care of that. So I'm in favor of it.
I'm going to ask a follow-up based on this issue. You both just came out and said you would be open to separating these. Do you commit to voting in favor of SNAP programs and keeping funding there? And Dr. Christensen, I believe I'll start with you.
Absolutely. In the state of North Dakota, there are many children that depend on SNAP benefits to have meals every day. My son attends an elementary school where the population is 65% free and reduced lunch. There's a lot of food insecurity in the state of North Dakota. In Jamestown, there are 2 other schools that almost have 50% free and reduced lunch rates. If you want children to be able to learn in their classrooms, they need to be fed. It's a completely appropriate program. We are protecting the vulnerable with that program. And so I would absolutely support SNAP benefits. And I would support the Farm Bill. Though I do think that we need to do more work to bring value-added processing to the state of North Dakota that's locally owned, that's low utility, and it's innovative. Those are the things that we should really be working for as a 21st century Farm Bill, not a 1980 Farm Bill.
Dr. Becker, I'm going to follow up with, because you said yes, you're in favor of dividing these out, separating. We have 2 separate votes. Then how do you vote on the SNAP program?
Well, I'm glad that you posed the question the way you did, because will I vote in favor of a bill that has SNAP in it? And the answer is I don't know, because I don't know how the bill is constructed. See, the trap politicians will get themselves into is they are afraid to vote no for a program that they like and are in favor of, even though it might be completely distorted, even though it might not have any oversight, even though the amount of spending is off the charts, because they don't want to be called out for voting against that good thing. Instead, what they need to do is vote appropriately. If it doesn't pass, fix it so that it's good for the people of North Dakota, the people of America. So yes, I think there is a place for food stamps, SNAP benefits. There's no doubt about that. But they shouldn't be given out willy-nilly as a political inducement to vote for a certain candidate or a certain party. What we've seen in the past number of years is a tremendous increase in the number of food stamps, and I think that it's politically motivated more than it is actually nutritional needs motivated. We have to get away from that. So in all likelihood, I would vote yes, but if some party, some politician adds a bunch of junk onto it, no way.
Final question that I have as far as agriculture is related. You both touched on this earlier when it comes to foreign countries and ownership. Up in Grand Forks, there's a community that's fighting amongst themselves because a project of corn milling and foofang is being proposed. And Dr. Becker, I'm curious, we'll start with you. Should this plant have been proposed? Should it have gone this far? Because now it seems as though that we're kind of pumping the brakes. What's your take on foofang?
Yeah, foofang, I've been a very strong and vocal opponent of the foofang deal. What you're talking about is a Chinese company coming into the food supply chain in Grand Forks. That in and of itself is problematic. You also are talking about dealing with a country that has horrible human rights abuses, that is overtly stealing intellectual property from America and is spying on America. And as if that wasn't enough, it's within a direct line of sight from the Grand Forks Air Force Base and in very close proximity to arguably the best drone program in the United States, if not the world. The thought process behind thinking this was okay escapes me. I don't understand it. And this was a clear failure of leadership by John Hoeven. He knew about it a year ago. I first learned about it when the people of Grand Forks started making some noise. It's like, what's this? And when I heard about it, I couldn't believe it. And so the people of Grand Forks, and then the people of North Dakota, and eventually the people of the United States started rising up and saying, we can't have this. During this whole time, in February, when I started trying to let people know about it on this network, John Hoeven was silent. March, April, silent. At the end of April, beginning of May, John Hoeven comes out and says, well, this is really a local issue. It's up to the Grand Forks City Commission to ensure that their concerns about security are addressed with Fufang. Are you kidding me? That is a complete abrogation of your responsibility, John Hoeven, and you have failed the people of North Dakota. Now that it's caught on nationally, and there's enough traction, and there's enough people applying pressure, now John Hoeven is saying the right thing. I guess it's better late than never, but not a whole lot better. A complete and abject failure.
Dr. Christensen. Dr. Christensen, same question posed for you. Your take on the Fufang project up in Grand Forks as a U.S. Senator.
So one of the things that I've learned living in North Dakota and watching John Hoeven is that he's a weather vane, right? He was just waiting to see where the wind was blowing with the Fufang plant. He didn't speak out until he absolutely knew that nobody would be against him speaking out against it. And he's still trying to have duck and cover with the Foreign Investment Review Committee, using that as a way to avoid saying, yeah, Grand Forks City Council, you messed up, you dropped the ball here, you should not have rezoned farmland as commercial land and sold it to this company. You also should listen to the community. You need to hear what they're saying. They're saying they don't want this facility because it's going to smell. They don't want this facility because it's going to use as much water as the city of Grand Forks currently uses. And they also have an affordable housing crisis in Grand Forks. If we bring in 200 more employees, how is that going to stress the Grand Forks housing market? How is that going to stress the businesses that are paying taxes right now and will have to pay their employees more because there's more competition there and there aren't enough houses? The city of Grand Forks failed. The mayor of Grand Forks failed. Doug Burgum failed. And Senator Hoeven waited to speak up, and he's waiting for duck and cover from the CFIUS review to actually say the Fufang plant is a bad idea. And of course, he's just saying, well, just put an American plant in there. That company owns the land. It's not that easy, but it sounds really good. John Hoeven is really good about waiting to see when the wind blows and saying the things that sound really good, but the work isn't there.
We're going to pivot a little bit from agriculture to energy, but there's a lot of overlap space between the two with our producers and the energy sector. What is your stance, Dr. Christensen first, your stance on landowner rights, especially when it comes to the siting of wind farms, pipelines, transmission lines, et cetera, when it comes to those landowners and the producers?
What landowner rights? I think that in the state of North Dakota, given the ineffectiveness of the Public Service Commission, being a landowner is really hard when it comes to having to give up your land to energy companies or the wind turbine electricity cooperatives. I think that the PSC is kind of a joke. You know, when somebody breaks the rules, they just kind of slap them on the wrist and they say, oh, we told you not to do that, don't do it again, and they'll reduce their fine by half. There is really no incentive for the cooperatives, for the energy producers or the pipeline builders to really be worried about infringing on landowner rights, because there is no serious impact on them if they break the rules. The GOP and the North Dakota government has become so comfortable with their power, they don't care about breaking the rules, and they don't care about enforcing them for their friends. And that's what we see in the state of North Dakota. Landowner rights don't matter unless you have a lot of money and you're connected to people in government.
Dr. Becker, same question. What is your stance on landowners' rights, especially when it comes to the siting of wind farms, pipelines, and transmission lines where energy and agriculture intersect?
Right. I've been a very strong advocate of private property rights from the beginning. You know, the whole purpose of government is to protect one's life, liberty, and property. During my time in the legislature, being on Judiciary Committee, I had the opportunity to help assist with decreasing the ability of quick take, which is eminent domain. So what eminent domain is where the government can come in and force you to sell an easement or to take whatever the company's willing to give you so they can put whatever they want through your land. It's a huge infringement on property rights. Now, it's not that there's never a case for eminent domain, but it should be restricted to the absolute most necessary times, and it generally isn't. So I've worked hard to try and rein that in, limit the ability for any industry to use eminent domain. Most recently, last week in fact, I had a bill drafted. We presented it at a press conference. A CO2 pipeline is being brought through. The landowners are not being respected. And that is a place where we absolutely should never use eminent domain, because it is not, carbon dioxide is not a public good. It's not a common use. What we are doing is looking at bringing in waste product from private companies so they can get rid of it, and we're going to dump it in central North Dakota. And people all along the way are going to make money, but it's not the people of North Dakota, it's private companies. When it comes to private economic development, we should never allow eminent domain usage. We must respect landowner rights.
Dr. Becker, a follow-up, just because this comes back to some of the energy concerns around the country. Carbon sequestration has become a major agenda issue across the U.S. and in North Dakota, with that pipeline that you mentioned as one of the topics. What is your opinion of this practice with carbon capture and how that plays into local economies like North Dakota and a national agenda?
So carbon sequestration, what we're looking at is taking carbon dioxide from various companies, pumping it underground so that it doesn't go into the atmosphere. There is a scheme that has been wholly bought into by many of our politicians, including our governor, and frankly, Senator Hoeven was effectively an architect of this scheme. It's called 45Q tax credits. And the federal government will take your money and my money and will pay private companies to shove that carbon dioxide underground. It's not proven. We don't know the safety. On a scale of what they're talking about, 12 million tons of carbon dioxide per year. The companies that get their 45Q tax credits are going to make $1 billion a year on this just from taxpayer-paid subsidies. Moreover, there is an aspect to using carbon dioxide to pump it in as enhanced oil recovery. Now, we can argue that that's a really good idea. It gets more oil out of the ground, it generates more energy to help America become energy independent, it provides more revenue for North Dakota. It's a win-win-win. The problem is, in this magical scheme thought up in part by Senator Hoeven, there is 42% more money if you shove that carbon dioxide in the ground under someone's farm than it is if you use it for enhanced oil recovery. That means that the preferential placement of carbon dioxide is not going to be used for enhanced oil recovery, and therefore it is not good for North Dakota. This is a scheme originally thought up by Al Gore with carbon credits, And then Obama went on to the social cost of carbon. And then Biden went into climate and carbon justice. And now you've got Senator Hoeven that's doubling down on it with this crazy scheme of carbon sequestration and 45Q tax credits that will enrich, believe me, enrich several companies.
Dr. Christensen, same question. Carbon sequestration has become a major agenda issue across the U.S. and in North Dakota. What is your opinion of this practice and how that plays into our local economy with carbon sequestration?
Okay, so I did a PhD at Iowa State that looked at the cost structures of algal biofuel production compared to terrestrial crops like corn and stuff like that. So I accounted for greenhouse gas emissions when I worked on my PhD. One of the things that really bothers me when we talk about carbon capture is that we use the word carbon. Carbon is a solid. It's what's in a pencil. And our lawmakers don't understand this. We are not transporting a solid in a pipeline that we are putting on landowners' land without their permission, right? We are talking about carbon dioxide, which is a gas heavier than air. It displaces air. So if there were to be a leak, you would, within a 3-mile radius, probably just have some impacts to cattle and humans. When there was a leak in Mississippi from their CO2 pipeline, 22 people went to the hospital. It will actually stop your car from running if CO2 is in the area. CO2 is what is causing greenhouse or global warming. And we do need to address the amount of CO2 that is in the air. I don't know that this scheme does anything than enrich a few people. Carbon sequestration, on the other hand, is something that we can do. And farmers do it all the time through photosynthesis. And I actually think that we should be focused on compensating farmers for sequestering carbon in the soil and not be worried about storing carbon dioxide in our ground, because we also have the risk that carbon dioxide, trust me, I'm a doctor, will acidify water, underground water. Carbon dioxide will acidify water. That's what's happening in our oceans right now. So this is not a proven technology. We should be focused on carbon dioxide sequestration in soil.
Keep along the topic of energy here. It's a very volatile commodity price, one of which North Dakota relies heavily on as far as budgets go. Ultimately, that also has an impact on family budgets when it comes to transportation, costs of gas. How do you balance the two as far as making sure that we use our resources responsibly, which is what I've heard, but also making sure that that cost isn't backing up on families? Is that a role for a U.S. Senate? Dr. Christensen, we'll start with you.
Well, John Hoeven's been on the Energy Committee serving in the Senate, and he has done very little to buffer the state of North Dakota from the global volatility of the oil market, right? So we are responding to Russia invading Ukraine with the increase in oil prices recently, which, yes, is good for the state in terms of revenue, but it's also bad for us as people, driving to our games for our kids and driving to work. And I don't think that John Hoeven is putting families first when he's in D.C. One of the things that really has struck me about his tenure is that he never pushed to have a refinery in the state of North Dakota. We manufacture, or we produce the most oil. I think we're ranked 3rd behind Alaska and Texas right now, and we don't have a refinery, a state-owned refinery, which we should have. Our state mill is a great asset, our state bank is a great asset, and we should have a state refinery. One, it would help buffer us from the impacts like hurricanes that shut down refineries in the south when we have hurricane season. It will also buffer us from shutdowns that oil companies like to do to increase the oil price. So I think that his time on the Energy Committee was wasted. I think his time as governor was a waste because he did not think about the future. He only thought about what was easy for John Hoeven, not for what's good for our families. We have to buffer our energy sector from the global OPEC. And we have to have refineries here if we're going to actually be able to make money from our resource.
Dr. Becker, a similar question. You've been in the state legislature now. You know how much the state relies on oil prices for budgeting, but that also impacts families when it comes to just the cost of paying for life. How do you balance the two in the U.S. Senate?
Well, balancing the energy costs and how it affects families, I guess, would be similar to most everything that we need to look at, and that is what can government do to improve on that. And when it comes to energy independence and the cost of energy, I think what we saw when Trump was in office, that we were effectively energy independent from the rest of the world. We were shipping oil out. Gas prices were low. I mean, things were looking grand. And then you have the Biden administration coming in with their war, their all-out assault on fossil fuels, closing down pipelines, shutting down areas for federal for leases of oil on federal lands. I mean, one thing after another, making it virtually impossible. Katrina talked about opening a refinery. It is so difficult to do that. We need to get government out of the way. And the approach needs to be effectively the opposite of what the Biden administration is doing. I agree, John Hoeven has been absent. Incognito, nowhere around. Where is he? Where's Waldo? I don't know, but he hasn't been there fighting for North Dakotans. And that's what we need. We need someone who's going to fight against the Biden administration, who's going to fight against this cause, this environmental extremism, this idea that we have to be carbon neutral. We can't sacrifice our entire society, the entire economy, in trying to become carbon neutral, when if we do that, we look at best case scenario, if no other carbon goes up, reducing the temperature of the ambient temperature by 0.13 degrees Celsius. But that isn't actually what's going to happen. It's going to go up if indeed man-made global warming is actually the cause, because Russia, India, China, Brazil are all increasing carbon dioxide far more than we can ever decrease it. So we need to give up on that crazy notion.
I actually have two follow-ups on that. Did you have a rebuttal?
Well, I do. And the rebuttal is that the oil companies have 2,000 leases in the state of North Dakota that they are not using. They are practicing capital restraint right now because they lost their shirts in 2020 during the global pandemic when oil bottomed out. And right now they are trying to make back all of this money on the backs of Americans. They could drill new wells, but they're not going to because it reduces their margin. They could pay for workover rigs to go out there and get more oil out of the ground, but they're not going to because they'll make less money. They are motivated by their margins and paying out their shareholders. And regarding global climate change, it is real. It is going to affect your life for the next 100 years if you're lucky to live that long. And yes, we need to do something. But one of the things that I love as an engineer is how amazing America is and how innovative we've always been, right? When we were fighting in World War II, we had 25 times the manufacturing capacity of the Axis powers. We were 2 years behind in developing an atomic weapon, and we did it before they did. We landed people on the moon because we developed the technology to do so. No other country has ever done that. And we can fight global climate change through innovation. In fact, we should be developing new technologies that mitigate the impacts of global climate change and actually do sequester carbon dioxide. We cannot put our heads in the sand here. We saw Hurricane Ian take out Fort Myer. More warmer temperatures means more energy in the air, means bigger storms that do more damage. We can do this. We are the most innovative nation in the world.
Dr. Becker, do you have a rebuttal?
Yeah, I've got a quick rebuttal. So, yeah, I disagree vehemently. The Biden administration has obviously done everything possible to make it so that there is no incentive whatsoever for an oil company to drill more. I agree. They're looking for profit like every business should. That's how our system works. We live in a market-driven capitalist system, and that capitalist system is exactly why we are the beacon of freedom around the world. So the idea that somehow the evil oil companies won't drill anymore and cause prices to be higher because they won't make a profit is ludicrous. I'm sorry. What I will tell you that is additionally equally or more ludicrous is Joe Biden selling oil reserve oil to foreign companies so he can help himself politically with no concern whatsoever about the security of our own nation.
With that, it's time we've got to take another break here, and we will be right back. This is a scheduled television break. We will continue more of this televised statewide North Dakota senatorial debate brought to you by the Dakotan and Beck News in just a moment.
You don't need to live in Silicon Valley to get the best internet speeds in America. You can find them right here in WRT territory.
If we all just put a little bit of effort in and work together, we can get
good.
a lot done. We can grow as a community.
WRT members can build successful businesses and receive quality education, all from the rural communities they love.
Sky's the limit for us. We can really do anything that anybody else can do, especially now that we're connected to the world.
Work and play from anywhere. Learn more at westriv.com.
Welcome to Dakota Cowboy, presented by Dakota Community Bank and Trust. I'm your host, Wild Bill. The character and legacy of the American West comes to life. We'll strive to give you a glimpse of the rich history. I've seen the toughest cowboys in the state of North Dakota. I've had a front row seat to those whose passion has been the preservation of history.
Dakota Cowboy, presented by Dakota Community Bank and Trust on Beck TV.
Now you can have the personalized forecast at your fingertips when you need it. Beck's exclusive Weather Insight is information tailored to you. Radar, weather alerts, forecasts, and videos. Download the free Weather on Beck News app. Search your app store now.
Lori Hins here with no apologies on Beck.
So irrefutable that mainstream media has to come out and admit it now. And it leads directly to the president's office,
where we bring you our after-hours oasis of sanity.
I just learned that the 7 dirty words weren't real. He just made them up. Like, these are the 7 dirty words you can't say.
Every Saturday and Sunday.
The importation people can't actually check it. I mean, it's nuts.
On Beck and Beck.News.
We have always said, and will continue to say on this show, that it's not enough to just trust the plan. How can these people show their faces in public after what they have done to our children? This has been the reality in Mexico for close to 2 decades now. I'm thinking above that and beyond that, because I don't think these people give a damn about what you say or what my voice is.
Hello everyone, I'm Katie Petrick, joined by David Fiorazzo.
Every week on Educated, we keep you informed on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college classrooms.
So stay educated with us weekdays at 2:30 p.m. Central Time on Beck News or anytime online at beck.news.
Now you can have the personalized forecast at your fingertips when you need it. Beck's exclusive Weather Insight is information tailored to you. Radar, weather alerts, forecasts, and videos. Download the free Weather on Beck News app. Search your app store now.
Welcome back to the senatorial debate between Dr. Christensen and Dr. Becker here on Beck Television. A little program note, there's going to be a 30-minute panel discussion with Lori Hintz to follow remotely from Beck TV Studio Bismarck. Featured panelists include endorsed Democratic DPL and former candidate for U.S. House Mark Haugen and North Dakota Farm Bureau President and conservative radio talk show host Darrell Lease. That will be following this program at 9 o'clock. Follow-up, Dr. Christensen, I believe you were next, just on energy. So North Dakota has an abundance of energy resources. What is your stance on national energy policy? And we were energy independent and where we are now, and how will you protect North Dakota's varied energy interests?
So the United States actually right now is the world's largest liquefied natural gas producer. And we export the most liquefied natural gas. I really think that North Dakota should be focusing on how to maximize its natural gas production and maximize the amount of time that it is able to produce natural gas. I think that's part of our energy future. Becoming carbon neutral is using natural gas. I also think that North Dakota is a great state for wind energy production. It's important that we continue to build on those successes. And I think the thing that's really missing from North Dakota is manufacturing and innovating battery storage. One of the things that will be a part of our energy future, whether you want it to be or not, is going to be battery technologies. And Hoeven was on the Energy Committee and probably didn't think to do any work and bring innovative battery manufacturing to the state of North Dakota. There's a patent that we let China use to develop a vanadium battery that can have 2 times the amount of energy of other batteries. And it was just until an NPR story that the Department of Energy was kind of like, well, we're not going to talk about this. But those are the sorts of opportunities that Hoeven has missed out on bringing to the state and planning for a future. Even if we store electricity from our coal plants and batteries, even if we store electricity from the wind turbines in batteries, we should be doing that. We should be innovating on battery storage technology in the state of North Dakota. We have an opportunity to be the leader in a market space. Imagine if we were the state that was leading production of the best batteries in the United States. That's not a bad thing. That's a really good thing.
Dr. Becker, same question. North Dakota has an abundance of energy resources, and we were energy independent. What is your stance on national energy policy, and how will you protect North Dakota's varied energy interests?
Yeah, the national policy, again, driven by the Biden administration, has caused the U.S. to be dependent on others instead of others dependent on us. We say an abundance of energy in North Dakota, and we do. We've got great sources for energy: coal, oil, coal, and then there's some others. When someone says, oh, I'm all about all of the above, you know what really worries me is when politicians like Governor Burgum, like Senator Hoeven say that what they're doing is talking about subsidy schemes that they can take part of and enrich individuals and businesses. John Hoeven, when he was governor, started the whole ethanol subsidy scheme and brought it all the way through well into being senator. Same thing for wind. All of these subsidies have given a tremendous lift up for these renewable alternative energies at the detriment of coal. Now that coal is on the ropes, John Hoeven's solution is, I got it, I know what to do. The same thing I always do, which is give taxpayer money as subsidies now to coal industry, to oil industry, with my 45Q program. Because at that point, he said, you know, we got to cause an effect, an even playing field. The problem is he caused the playing field to be uneven in the first place. You know that during his first years as senator, he voted in favor of wind energy credits, which is, again, free money for these companies, and then he extended them. Now he's against it because it's not popular. The key to North Dakota, to the United States, on a national policy level is to focus on fossil fuels. And if and when renewables become efficient enough to use, when they become reliable enough to use, so we don't have to worry about our houses going black and cold in case there's no wind or when the sun is not shining, maybe at that point in time we can look at it. But for right now, oil and coal.
I have a follow-up question to that, and you brought up the coal. There is a national and global attack on the coal industry, oil and gas industries, of which North Dakota has an abundance. Do you feel that there is a place for these resources in the future, and how would your actions in Washington further your opinion?
Well, I think there's a place for all of these. Any technology in any field that a company wants to bring forth, they should. And if it works, they'll hopefully become rich, and good for them because they brought something new to the world, to the United States. But that's not what we're talking about. It's never what we're talking about. What we're talking about are schemes, are giving taxpayer dollars to technologies, to businesses that have a plan that will on its own never work. What I always say is, look, if there is a plan, a technology, a business that is going to be profitable, they don't need the taxpayers' money. And if they're not profitable, they should never get the taxpayers' money. And that's what we're looking at with all of these types of things. We just need to call it quits. Let companies do what they're going to do. It distorts the market, it hurts the consumer, it has an artifact effect of increasing prices, which is causing all of us to suffer.
Dr. Christensen, same question. There seems to be a national and global attack on the coal, oil, and gas industries, of which North Dakota has an abundance. Do you feel that there is a place for these resources in the future, and how would your actions in Washington further your opinion as well?
So I disagree with Rick about the market levers that are being pulled. I think that fossil fuel companies are really good at exploiting the market. The market isn't fair for the consumer. The market is set up for large oil companies to make as much money as they possibly can, or countries like Saudi Arabia, right? Or Russia. If they need to, they can manipulate the market. And so I think it's really important that we are clear that the market forces are not competitive for the consumer. They are competitive for the people who own the assets and own the transportation systems. And so that's what's impacting North Dakotans right now, is people who are exploiting the market to line their pockets at our expense. Now, do I think that there's a future for the energy sector in North Dakota? Of course. It's North Dakota's biggest industry. But I also think that we need to be realistic and develop innovative ways to build on that success. And there's nothing wrong with adopting new technologies. I bet everybody in this room has a phone that they carry around with them, that they didn't carry around with them in 2007. There is going to be a disruptive technology, much like cell phones, that will disrupt the fossil fuel market. And that's okay, because North Dakota could be positioned to be a leader in those other areas if we plan for that, if we do the work, if we send somebody to Washington, D.C. that does more than show up every 6 years. It's important to invest in the future, just like it's important to recognize the resources we have right now are valuable.
My follow-up, and Dr. Becker, I believe it's your turn here. We talk about subsidies, and that always comes in with the conversation, in particular about wind energy. We've talked about land ownership before. If we're opposing subsidies, my question then becomes, is that all subsidies? I mean, are you opposed to providing those types of benefits to, say, oil and coal as well?
I'm opposed to all subsidies. Now, one caveat to that. When we have a system of subsidies where players in the game have engaged in a way that those are the rules of the game, they understand what's going on, they shouldn't be taken out from under them, and fall down. But I think what we need to do is work away from that. So your question, I think, is getting at a claim that oil and gas get subsidies. Well, yes, I think that we should move away from that. There is no doubt. If an energy source stands on its own, is profitable, why does it need subsidies? It doesn't, period.
Dr. Christensen, same for you. As far as we talk about subsidies in North Dakota, that seems to really follow along when we talk about wind energy. Are you opposed to subsidies for all of the above other energy sources?
No, I'm not. I actually think that those subsidies are probably appropriate. Some lobbyist was very successful at getting them across the way, and I think that they're probably helping out North Dakota energy industries. I think the thing that we need to really work towards is making sure that taxpayer money is being used to invest in research and development in technologies that will improve our lives, right? And we have a history of doing that, whether it's in the Department of Energy, whether it's in the Department of Defense, and it's important that we build on those successes going forward.
Very good. We're going to switch on to infrastructure now, another one of those topics that probably has some division between the two of you, but there was a bipartisan bill that passed Congress. 2 U.S. senators in North Dakota voted for it. Our lone congressman voted against it. We got roads, bridges, we got telecommunications, this very network that we're proud to be broadcasting on, the recipient, because they do important work, and to the tune of, millions of dollars that go towards this. My question to you, Katrina Christensen, or Dr. Christensen, pardon me, you would have been in that chair, would you have voted for this bipartisan infrastructure bill?
Yes, I would have. I think the infrastructure bill probably didn't go as far as it could to help out the state of North Dakota with some of its infrastructure challenges. I think it's incredibly important that the broadband component was in the bill, because we've seen just over the last decade how jobs and innovative businesses really need to have access to the internet, whether it's the cryptocurrency stuff or whether it's shopping online or Amazon or any of those businesses. They all need broadband. If you're working from home, you need broadband, right? We can do telehealth. We need broadband. So those are really important investments that, of course, I would have supported. But I think there should have been more done to improve access to other infrastructures that are failing in the state. And what I mean by that is the lack of access to affordable health care, the lack of access to mental health care. We need to think of those things as infrastructure, because it's what makes our communities whole and healthy.
Dr. Becker, the same question. That infrastructure bill did pass. Our U.S. senators voted for it. Congressman Armstrong voted against it. Would you have voted for that bill?
I absolutely would not have voted for Biden's fake green infrastructure deal. There are 1,000 reasons to not put John Hoeven back into Washington, D.C. That possibly is number one. That vote, he and I believe 18 other senators crossed over and handed Joe Biden his biggest win of his presidency. The Liberty score for 15 of those 19 senators is an F. These are all big spenders. The fake infrastructure deal, and I call it fake because this was a $1.2 trillion bill. I believe 120, perhaps $130 billion went to infrastructure, roads and bridges. What is also included is electric charging stations everywhere. North Dakota is going to be the beneficiary of these charging stations. Money for electric ferries, money for electric school buses. You know what else was in there? Billions and billions of dollars for the 45Q tax credits, for companies to get rich by developing these sequestration strategies. There's also $400 million to help fish swim upstream better. There's billions of dollars that are going so that people in inner city get a subsidy of $30 per month for broadband internet. This is wholly unnecessary. He abandoned North Dakota in voting for this, giving Biden his biggest win ever. It is egregious. It's political malpractice, frankly.
I do have just a quick follow-up with that, because you just mentioned broadband, which, telecommunications, we're on Beck television right now that, is able, because they do vital work, they use federal dollars to expand their services. So you do not support those federal dollars going to these telecommunications, these cooperatives, to expand those as infrastructure?
Yeah, so, what you're saying, Frederick Bastiat was a philosopher, a political philosopher and historian, and he said, what's funny is that when I say I'm against government education, the socialists say I'm against education. And you can go down the line. So I'm not opposed to broadband, obviously. And if this company, clearly we're on broadband now. They were able to do it without the $1.2 trillion fake green infrastructure deal. So apparently it's not necessary to provide broadband. Now, if they're smart and they're playing within the system and that's what government's going to do, then that's what government's going to do. But no, absolutely, I would not support that whatsoever.
Dr. Christensen, do you have a rebuttal?
I've driven all over the state this year, and so I've seen a lot of North Dakota roads. And there are times when I've thought, man, has this place been bombed out? Okay, we have a small tax base in a very large state. One of the great things about being a part of a republic is that we federalize some of our investments. We are the beneficiaries of being a part of the United States of America. And this investment in our roads, in our broadband, was appropriate and timely. It is going to make living in North Dakota better. It is going to make living in rural communities better. You might be able to start a business from a farm that you bought. You will have opportunities you did not have before. You will have a better driving experience going from Jamestown to Gwinner, right? These are the things that we get to take advantage of being a part of the United States of America.
If I can follow up. The paltry amount that North Dakota got for roads and bridges in North Dakota pales in comparison to the amount of money that is going to be paid as subsidies to private companies. So this was not a win for North Dakota.
Continuing on the infrastructure's theme, and you guys touched on it a little bit, but states like California and recent events in Texas, Florida have demonstrated the fragility of energy transmission. What is your stance on, and how would you work to improve grid stability and pipeline infrastructure in this country? Dr. Christensen.
Well, I certainly wouldn't move to Texas. I wouldn't. No, actually, teaching senior design at the University of Jamestown, one of the lectures that I give is the fragility of the Texas grid. The rest of the United States is on the eastern grid and the western grid. Now, there are certainly updates that the grid needs to make. There are innovations that we can have to have microgrids. There are things that we can do to improve transmission and efficiency. And I think it's completely appropriate that we make those investments and that we're not susceptible to things like Texas is, because they haven't maintained their power plants. They are susceptible to the impacts of global climate change, like having a polar vortex. There was an 11-year-old kid that played in snow for the first time when that polar vortex went over Texas. He died later on that evening because his home lost electricity and he froze to death. Who wants to live like that in the United States of America? I don't know anybody that wants to live like that. We need to make investments in our grid so that we can all have happy lives, so that when we put our kids down at night, we know that they're not going to die because the grid went out. And so if we need to use taxpayer dollars to make those federal investments, then that's what we should do.
Dr. Becker, same question for you. With recent events in similar states like California, Texas, Florida, demonstrated the fragility of energy transmission. What is your stance on, and how would you work to improve grid stability and pipeline infrastructure?
The biggest concern I have with the grid stability and reliability does not stem from the oil and gas. It stems from wind and solar. That's where we have no reliability at all. And in fact, a part of what went wrong in Texas was their wind electrical generating facilities. That was in part. I would suggest that it is good to spend money on improving reliability. There's no doubt about that. I think that the hundreds of billions of dollars that are going to private companies to store carbon and to build electrical charging stations all throughout the United States would be much better spent on improving our grid reliability. That's something I could vote for.
I would just like to rebuttal as
Sure,
somebody
ahead,
who's
Dr.
actually given a presentation about the Texas power outage. The power grid failed because the power plants did not do the winterization that they should have done following the 2011 vortex. They didn't do any of the investments that they should have done because it ate into their margins. That's what a deregulated energy market looks like. People die.
I'll follow up on that. So, look around the world where we have the most problems when it comes to energy grid reliability are in countries and states that have relied greater on these alternative or renewable energies. The countries that are self-sufficient when it comes to oil, carbon, gas, and nuclear, they don't have a problem with grid reliability in the same way that the countries who are all about green energy are suffering from.
We're going to move on as we are watching the clock here, and we do thank everybody for watching us on Beck TV. We're going to combine a couple of these items: supply chain, workforce, immigration, because they're all kind of intertwined here. You pick anybody in this room, any industry, there's a workforce shortage out there. People cannot find employees. I'm curious, and I'm not sure who starts here, so I will start with Dr. Christensen. Workforce, you're a U.S. Senator, you win this election. What can or what should be done in your position?
So I think that one thing that we need to really address is that we do need to have a functioning, efficient immigration system that supports the growth of the American economy. And right now, it's just become a distraction. The way that we talk about immigration is not good for making the appropriate investments in our economy, in our workforce. The other thing that we really need to do is make sure that people have jobs that are well paid and they have access to time off so that people want to work. You know, right now, we have a market where the actual people who have the jobs have leverage. That's like the first time since I've ever been born, right? And it's important that people make money for doing the jobs that they do. Having a job is a contract. I do this for you and you pay me. You give me this time off so that I can have a kid. You give me this time off so that I can go for a vacation. I think part of the reason that we see low participation of people that live in the United States in the labor market is because employers have exploited the workforce.
Dr. Becker, similar question as far as workforce. We all know that it's a challenge here. You're a U.S. Senator. What, if anything, would you do to help alleviate this challenge?
Well, to address workforce issues, I would look at the border to some extent. We need to build a wall, keep out the human traffickers, keep out the fentanyl pushers, keep out the terrorists, but let people in that are interested in working. We need to have a system that works much better. The way it's been working is a complete failure. We also need to take a look at our domestic policy. Look at what has occurred over the last 2 and now 3 years. The amount of money that politicians like John Hoeven, like so many others, are just throwing at every problem. The money is just out there. We saw with COVID, people are getting paid to stay at home. I believe, frankly, that there's another component. I think people are sick of all of this woke crap out there. They're like, I don't want to go to work anymore. There are many facets for why we have a labor force issue. And yes, every industry is affected. There's no doubt about that. But again, the solution is do our best to have government not keep screwing it up and making it worse. Pull government out. Why did North Dakota get an extra 150,000 people during the oil boom years? It was because there were jobs here that paid a lot of money. And government had nothing to do with creating that environment. So what you do is you improve the tax climate, you improve the regulatory environment that allows businesses to create more jobs. Government never creates jobs. And there you will find people looking for work. They're not getting paid to stay at home. There is going to be good pay. There's not going to be government mandated time off, which actually would just make the situation worse. We let the market play out. I agree, it's a contract between employer and employee. It always works if we leave it alone.
We're coming up against a break, but I want to get one more question in because it kind of dovetails into that with workforce needs. Education. So North Dakota businesses not insulated against the nationwide workforce shortages like we're seeing in all sectors. Education is one that is seeing a workforce shortage as well, and they're the ones that are empowered to train that workforce for the future. So with the higher ed opportunities for today's and tomorrow's kids, how would you address widespread teacher shortages, and what's the role of parents in K-12 education? Dr. Becker.
Right, so if we look at K-12, number one, we need to create a better environment for teachers to work. They can't discipline kids. A lot of them, especially in bigger cities, are frankly in danger from the kids themselves. There is all of this critical race theory crap, social emotional learning crap. It's just such a poor environment in which to work. The other thing is that, yes, we can encourage increasing teacher pay. What's a good way to do that? Maybe we need to increase the teachers rather than increase the administrators. There's so much money going to more administrators. You look at the administrators that have been hired in K-12 and especially higher education, they're skyrocketing. The student population is basically even. Not the administrators, they're just jacking way up. And so I think we take a look at some very simple solutions and you suddenly create an environment in which someone says, you know what, I love kids, I love teaching, I want to impart knowledge, I can now do that more freely without the heavy hand of government, and I can constrain those kids, I can teach those kids in the way that I see best.
Dr. Christensen, you see this on the higher ed level, but you know, all sectors in North Dakota not insulated against workforce shortages. One of the biggest ones that we're seeing a workforce shortage in is educators in K-12 education. So promoting those opportunities for today's and tomorrow's kids, how would you address widespread teacher shortages, and what's the role of parents in K-12 education?
Well, as a parent of 3 children, I have participated in the PTO at my school for the last 9 years. And so I am very involved in my child's education. And so I think I have a much better sense of what it's like to be a kid and what it's like to be a teacher right now. And the pandemic really impacted our youth. And we see that there really is a social, emotional, and behavioral challenge for some of these kids in the classroom. And what that does is it interrupts learning. And so the teachers spend a lot more time disciplining or dealing with somebody who's having a bad day, or maybe they're in crisis. And so they're not able to teach. And that's frustrating because they're trained to teach. In the James River Valley, we have 1 behavioral psychologist for 1,500 students. We do not have the right ratios to support our teachers so that they can do the teaching and they're not doing the discipline. They're not doing the mental health counseling. They're not trying to do cognitive behavioral therapy in their classrooms. It's really important that we listen to the teachers. One thing I am going to agree with Rick on in this case is that many of our public schools are administratively top heavy. The superintendent in Jamestown makes $175,000. Some of my son's favorite teacher, his 4th grade teacher, makes like 46. Think about that. The superintendent makes more than 3 times what a teacher does. And they're with kids all day, every day. And the reason that my son loves her is because she's committed. She was committed, you know, to making her class a really great learning experience. And so I do think we need to correct the ship with administrative pay, but we also need to address the reality that there are mental health concerns in our classroom and teachers need support.
Dr. Becker?
I've got just a quick comment. I had a little time left over. Because I'm so passionate about what occurred over the course of the last couple of years with COVID, I want to address one comment. COVID is not responsible for the psychological, emotional issues with our kids for a year or 2 of a loss of learning. COVID did not do that. Government did that. Government response to COVID, which was not based in science, did that to your children.
Dr. Christensen, before we hit the break, is there anything else you would like to add?
It doesn't matter what caused it. What matters is that it's impacting the learning in our classrooms, and we're adults, and we owe it to our children to fix it, and fix it with real solutions.
It matters a great deal what caused it, because if we don't identify what caused it, we won't prevent it the next time it happens.
We have to break right there. Please stay with us. We'll continue with more of this televised statewide North Dakota senatorial debate brought to you by the Dakotan and Beck News. We'll return with the final portion of the debate right after this. This scheduled television break. I'm Steve Bach along with Tyler Axis moderating this senatorial debate on Beck Television.
You don't need to live in Silicon Valley to get the best internet speeds in America. You can find them right here in WRT territory.
If we all just put a little bit of effort in and work together, we can get a lot done. We can grow as a community.
WRT members can build successful businesses and receive quality education, all from the rural communities they love.
The sky's the limit for us. We can really do anything that anybody else can do, especially now that we're connected to the world.
Work and play from anywhere. Learn more at westriv.com.
We're the ladies of another view.
Program every day that I write and I edit, I put together because I want people to have news from a true perspective.
Bringing you our take on local issues.
This isn't your dad's or your grandpa's Democratic Party that are in charge right now.
With views you won't see anywhere else.
Who is our greatest adversary in the world? And without question, it is China.
Catch us weekdays at 4:30 Central on Beck News and online at beck.news.
Lori Hins here with no apologies on Beck.
So irrefutable, the mainstream media has to come out and admit it now. And it leads directly to the president's office,
where we bring you our after-hours oasis of sanity.
I just learned that the 7 dirty words weren't real. He just made them up. Like, these are the 7 dirty words you can't say.
Every Saturday and Sunday.
The importation people can't actually check it. I mean, it's nuts.
On Beck and Beck.news.
Hey y'all, it's Trent on the loose. I'm a 6th generation farmer, husband, patriot, father. And as much as I'd love to just sit here under this shade tree and celebrate my own place on my front porch, truth of the matter is that people don't know who, where, and how is producing their food. So travel the country with Trent on the loose, and we'll find those interesting human interest stories behind the people that bring us the efficient food supply. Trent on the loose.
Beck News is your leader in local. Beck specials and live information for you. Original programming. Exclusive local sports. Beck is local for you. Uncensored topics and uncensored opinions. Unapologetic politics, where all sides are represented. Full episodes online anytime at beck.news. All in one network. Your leader in local, Beck News.
Welcome back to the North Dakota U.S. senatorial debate here, and I want to thank the Dakotan as well as Beck TV. I do want to remind those of you watching both here in person and at home that there's going to be a 30-minute panel discussion with Lori Hins to follow remotely from the Beck TV studio in Bismarck. Featured panelists are the Dem NPO endorsed candidate and former candidate for U.S. House, and Mark Haugen, and a North Dakota Farm Bureau president, conservative radio talk show host Daryl Lease to follow this. I'm going to get back into the questions here. And we're going to switch gears. This time is ticking here. Crime is something a lot of people are talking about. There was a report in the North Dakota Attorney General's office just rolled out not long ago, just within the last month, saying violent crime's on the rise here. It's been a national narrative going forward across all platforms. I believe, Dr. Christensen, it is your time for me to take your first response. What can be done? What would you as a U.S. Senator do to address the increase in crime across the nation?
I think that the AG is just bringing that up to distract from his incompetence and the role that he's serving in currently. And it's just a distraction from the way that he's mishandled emails and the way that he might have been involved in something that he shouldn't have been involved in. But aside from that, the reality is that, yes, there is crime that happens, and we need to start to address why those crimes happen and ways to prevent them in the state of North Dakota. I think a lot of that probably has to do with drug addiction. A lot of it has to do with poverty, and a lot of it has to do with lack of opportunity. And so people are participating in criminal activities because they don't have opportunity. If there's drug trafficking, if there's drug addiction involved, we really need to look at what do our drug addiction counseling services look like in the state? And they're pretty lacking. And, you know, having one day a year that Doug Burgum set up for us to remember, you know, addiction is an issue, doesn't fix the problem. You know, addiction is a lifelong challenge. And so I think that we need to make sure that we're not incriminating people who are going through mental health crises and they're getting the help that they need. We need to make sure that people who are addicted to drugs and involved in drug crimes are getting addiction counseling. And aside from that, I'm not sure what other crimes there are right now, but I think that it's important that we address the things that drive the crimes.
Dr. Becker, I'm going to follow up with you as well. Crime is a topic of conversation in every state. There's a perception that there's increasing amounts of crime, both violent and non-violent. What needs to be done from a U.S. Senate standpoint?
One of the things that we see that seems to be consistent with crime is that it has a very strong preponderance of happening where the criminals come from fatherless homes. We need to fix that. Now, that problem started with Lyndon Baines Johnson, with the war on poverty. And what we saw from that is a perverse incentive where homes started finding that financially they could do better without a man in the house. There are several other things that deal with the nuclear family as well that we need to focus on that. We need to make sure the family is intact, because with an intact family, one is far less likely to commit a crime. Another area, I would say, we have to fund the police, not defund the police, fund the police, because we need enforcement of laws. These various cities, usually in Democrat-held areas, with the smash and grabs, with this and that, and there's no enforcement. There's no one held accountable. Of course there's going to be crime. If you don't hold people accountable, there will be crime. The other thing is, we need increased gun ownership. Every state should be a constitutional carry state.
Follow up to that, so you mentioned some of the addiction issues, Dr. Christensen, and Dr. Becker, you mentioned how defunding the police have been a movement. One of the things that I saw firsthand as the mayor of the city of Bismarck was that drug trafficking that increased and precipitated so many other forms of crime. What is your stance on legalizing marijuana? Because there's a lot of those that think that it is a gateway drug to other forms of addiction. Dr. Christensen.
I think that we should legalize marijuana. It's not a gateway drug. There are peer-reviewed studies that say that. But here's my reason why. And it's because the marijuana industry is actually a really innovative industry. The products that dispensaries are making now were not made in the 1980s, like corn wet milling products were made. We actually have an opportunity to look at the marijuana processing industry and look at ways that we can apply that to some of our other specialty crops, like flaxseed. You know, the other thing about marijuana is that it has a bunch of different cannabinoids, not just THC, and those cannabinoids can have medicinal impacts on people. You know, there's a very well-known story about how marijuana can help people who are, suffering from epilepsy. It can help to prevent seizures. And if you're somebody whose life is limited, your ability is limited because of seizures, you want to have access to that. I think that the state legislature slow-rolled the medicinal marijuana because they're uncomfortable with the idea. But it's really an opportunity for our farmers to participate in and develop value-added, innovative processing. And I think it might help cut down on some of the trafficking that we're seeing, but we still have to deal with the methamphetamines that we're seeing in our communities. And that takes some serious attention and serious resources. One of the things that I sometimes find myself thinking about is that poor baby that died of dehydration north of Jamestown when that mom was high on meth. And I just don't understand why our state hasn't done more to stop things like that.
Dr. Becker, similar question. Your stance on marijuana?
Well, you know, I have a little bit of a problem with the way the question was posed because it tied marijuana into opioids, fentanyl, meth, whatever it might be. Marijuana is entirely different. In 2017, I first brought the decriminalization of marijuana to the North Dakota State Legislature. I do not think that we should be putting people in jail at taxpayer expense, taking people away from their families, causing more dependence for something that I will argue has no victim. There is no victim from someone having personal consumption of marijuana. Marijuana is far less dangerous than alcohol. That's irrefutable, and it makes a lot of people feel uncomfortable. There are far more deaths from alcohol than there is from marijuana. We should not be causing people to be criminals if they are conducting something, an activity in which there is no victim. It is not a gateway drug. It is not physiologically addictive. It might be psychologically addictive. It is nicotine, far more addictive than marijuana. So we have been, I guess, taught to believe that it's this evil gateway drug. It simply isn't. I think that the best thing, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, the nice thing is that North Dakotans will have the ability to decide for themselves come November. And if North Dakota votes in favor of it, then that's going to be fine. Believe me, we're all going to live. Everything will be okay. If North Dakotans vote against it, then that's the way it's going to be. And I think that's the way it ought to be. So yes, for me, I'll tell you, I'm going to vote in favor of it. I just don't think there's any issues.
We're going to move right along here. As a senator, you would be very much involved in the Supreme Court in appointments, and we had a very big decision come down not long ago with the Dobbs decision when it comes to abortion access. Dr. Becker, this is your turn. Did you, one, agree with the decision? And number two, what would you like to see in North Dakota be done following that decision?
Can you repeat the second part of your question?
What would you like North Dakota in particular to do following that decision?
Oh. Well, so the Dobbs decision was the right decision. The Roe v. Wade construed out of whole cloth this right in the Constitution that was never there. So the idea of what the Supreme Court did, which left it to the states in the parameters that they did, was completely appropriate. North Dakota has, in effect, two trigger laws, whereupon the Supreme Court having a judgment in which it is no longer a constitutional right, North Dakota would then have abortion be illegal. I was one of the co-sponsors on one of those two bills. So that's what I think North Dakota should do. As far as the Supreme Court makeup, I want to see individuals on the Supreme Court that adhere to the Constitution based on not only textualism, but original intent. This concept of a living document with the Constitution is a very dangerous concept, and it's really what's led us down the road to where we're at today.
Dr. Christensen, and folks, time is ticking before our closing remarks here. Did you agree with the Dobbs decision from the Supreme Court? Now that decision's out, what would you like North Dakotans to do with that decision?
I did not agree with the Dobbs decision. I actually agree with Kara Mund in what she said with her debate against Kelly Armstrong. I don't think that the government should be mandating your healthcare decisions. I think that bans put women's lives at risk because doctors aren't really sure what they're liable for. How far along with sepsis from a miscarriage do you have to be to get the medical care that you need to live? I think that the AG has shown he doesn't really know how to answer that question. I think it's important that we recognize that the Dobbs decision actually removed religious freedom from that area and enforced a government mandate. So this idea that it's a states' right issue is really nice to say. It's something that everybody wants to hear. But if you've ever lived in a state outside of North Dakota, you know that they're not all equal. Actually, there's a lot of inequality in the United States of America, and that is why we have federal protections. And the Supreme Court threw out a law that had been standing for 50 years. For what purpose? other than to achieve something that they've been working for 50 years. And now you have people who are not able to access the medicine that they used to be able to get at the pharmacy for their rheumatoid arthritis. You have 55-year-old women who are being denied medicine before their hysterectomy because they might be getting an abortion. You have all of these cases of people who are bleeding from ectopic pregnancies in Texas because doctors are afraid to treat them. You have rape victims who don't know what they need to do to prove that their pregnancy was the result of a rape. So these bans don't work. Government should not be allowed to make healthcare decisions for women or for anyone.
Dr. Becker, a quick rebuttal.
Yes.
Very quick, please.
So I think this is important to discuss. We're not talking about women's health care. We're not talking about reproductive rights. Those are misnomers. We small government, constitutional conservatives don't want to do anything with your privacy. We don't want to do anything with your womb. Do whatever you want with your body. What we don't want is for you to kill babies. That's it.
As the only woman in this race, as the only person in this race that has been pregnant and given birth, as the only person in this race that's had a miscarriage, I do think it's about women's health care. Rick Becker is very good at saying the things that he believes in, and I respect him for that. But I'm also a truth teller. This is about women's health care. People are not getting the health care that they need in Arizona because of a territorial ban. People in Texas are not getting the immediate health care that they need because of the ban there. There are places all over the country now where women do not have access to the health care that they deserve when they need it because of a government mandate. And you, as freedom seekers, should be clapping at that.
One quick follow-up, and this is a yes or no question. What would you do to represent the wishes of North Dakotans in Washington when it comes to this issue? Dr. Christensen.
I think that there's evidence that North Dakotans support a woman's ability to access the health care that she needs when she needs it. The 2014 Personhood Bill initiative failed with over 60% of the vote. I think that there's a silent majority in the state of North Dakota that supports private medical decisions made by not just men, but women too.
Dr. Becker?
Oh, Katrina, I have to say, you keep saying health care. Outside of abortion, what are we talking about? What health care?
I just detailed to you ectopic pregnancies, failure to get medicine for rheumatoid arthritis.
There's nothing.
Yes,
those are not issues.
States.
Those are not issues that are addressed with this ruling whatsoever. Ectopic pregnancies are not addressed. Any other aspect of women's health care is not addressed. Those are red herrings because it's too painful, embarrassing, whatever it is, to say what we're really talking about is killing babies. We're not talking about women's health care.
Ladies and gentlemen, getting lively, which I very much appreciate, but we are up against the clock here, and we do have to conclude the senatorial debate with closing statements of 3 minutes from each of the candidates, and we will begin with Dr. Christensen on your closing remarks.
So I really enjoyed my time here tonight. I just really appreciate everyone coming out and participating in democracy and this time-honored form of debate. Thank you again to Steve, and thank you, Tyler, for coming out. And Dr. Becker, I really have had fun up until about the last 5 minutes. But I'm good now. No, I am really looking forward to representing you in the United States Senate because I am a problem solver. I want to work on the issues that ail our state and that ail our country. I am somebody who is motivated, I am tenacious, I want to do the right thing all of the time. And one thing that I want to point out that distinguishes me from the other candidates in this race is I haven't taken any shortcuts. I've been campaigning since I had the endorsement. I haven't depended on PAC money to put up commercials marketing Nancy Pelosi as my opponent, right? I have been carrying the water this whole campaign, doing the work that you need from a senator, understanding what your communities need from their senator. And as your senator, I will carry that water.
Dr. Becker, your final 3-minute closing remark.
Thank you very much. Much appreciation to you two, the moderators. Katrina, same with you, I agree. I've had fun up here with you. I think you're a worthy opponent, and I appreciate that you had the gumption to debate in person, which we cannot say about John Hoeven. So the reason I want to do this task, and believe me, it's not going to be an enjoyable task. I do not want to live in Washington, D.C., but I'm willing to live in Washington, D.C. to fight for you. What we are looking at is another 2 years of the Biden administration. In my opinion, we cannot afford to elect someone who is going to further the Joe Biden leftist, progressive, Marxist cause. But we also cannot send back someone who stands in the shadows, flies under the radar. We need a fighter. I'm in this race because I believe America is at a crossroads. I don't know how we can possibly get out of the jam that we are in America if we keep sending the same people back to Washington, D.C. We need to end the status quo. We cannot have big government Republican. We cannot have big government Democrat. We need someone who's primarily concerned about freedom and keeping government out of your lives. I can guarantee you that when I get to Washington, I will be fighting for you. I will not stand down to anybody for any reason, so long as I can further the cause of freedom in North Dakota and across America.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank both of our candidates tonight for coming here and being here in person and the debate that is aired across the entire state of North Dakota. I appreciate anybody who puts their name on a ballot and stands up for what they believe in. So I do appreciate both of you for coming on. I also have a lot of respect for both of you having a well-spoken, dignified campaign. I'd also like to thank my co-moderator here. Special thanks to the candidates and Tyler Axness for moderating with me, to Beck TV for airing the debate live with the help of the Dakotan. Furniture courtesy of Zimmerman's Furniture in Bismarck. Thank you for our volunteers who assisted with registration, clock management, crowd control. I'd like to thank our audience here tonight as well. Thank you guys. Give yourselves a round of applause for coming out tonight. And of course, our television audience at home tonight watching this and future airings on Beck Television, and those participating tonight here in person. So, Tyler, it's been a pleasure.
It has been. I appreciate everyone, the candidates, Steve, you as well, the audience. Thank you for your lively participation as well. I do want to remind everybody watching at home and here in person that after this does wrap up here in a moment, that Beck will host a special post-debate panel discussion. It's a half-hour show highlighting some of the best of tonight's discourse. So stay tuned to Beck TV or the Beck stream online as host Lori Hinz plays clips from tonight's debate between candidates Dr. Rick Becker and Dr. Katrina Christensen. And in-studio panelists Mark Haugen and Darrell Lease provide their takes on the candidates' comments and answers. That'll be following a quick commercial break.
And one little side note, look forward to having both of you on both my program, as I'm sure Tyler does as well, on KFGO in the afternoons, myself, Super Talk 1270 in Bismarck and Mandan from 9 to 11, Monday through Friday. So look forward to hearing more from you as well as other state races across the state also. So once again, thank you everyone for watching from Memorial Hall in Washburn, North Dakota. One more time, a big thank you for Beck Communications, Beck Television for airing this, as well as our friends over at the Dakotan who helped put this on also this evening. So once again, thank you candidates, and thank you everyone from home.